Good morning, or afternoon as the case may be. I'm Jeff Rubin, and I want to welcome you to my webinar on ageism for thought leaders and thought leaders to be. Age is a conversation many of us choose to avoid. It's like the elephant in the room. Everybody's doing it, but few of us really want to talk about it. Yet we avoid the subject at our own peril. We are in the midst of an age revolution. It's happening worldwide. It's taking a toll on countless numbers of individuals, families, businesses, and communities. And if we do nothing to prepare for the impact, I'm deeply concerned for the future of my own and other generations. As thought leaders and thought leaders to be, you are in a unique position to begin this conversation. That's why I've invited you to this webinar and why I hope you'll join me in this cause. During the time together, expect to be informed, engaged, and hopefully inspired to join me in taking the first step in your own community to bring about this much needed culture change. So let's get started. What can you expect today? You'll learn about the issues and opportunities associated with positive aging. You'll learn about dialogue with others who share your values and concerns, and they help you access resources and services. And you'll become empowered to take action that benefits you financially and feeds you emotionally, spiritually, and socially. And one more thing. My friend Nate, age 11, when I asked him what advice would he give to somebody younger than himself, he said, dream big. So I encourage you, everyone on this call, everyone listening to this webinar, to dream big, because that's how things are accomplished. So our conversation today is about why ageism still exists, why you should care, and why it makes sense for you to become a thought leader in your community. I think it's important to begin with who is a thought leader. The phrase thought leader has become a buzzword in business these days. Generally, it's referred to any individual or firm that is recognized as an authority in a specialized field whose expertise is sought after and often rewarded. Some people, though, think of thought leadership as an entry point to a relationship that should intrigue, challenge, and inspire. It should help start a relationship where none exists, and it should enhance existing relationships. But thought leaders do one more thing that sets them apart from the crowd. They share information with the world and inspire positive change. Thought leadership can come from any source. Anyone on this webinar can be a thought leader. And so with that said, let's take a look at some of the thought leaders that we've had throughout history. I would say probably the first thought leader was the fellow who invented the wheel. Probably made a big difference in his community for years to come. But there are others who say the person who discovered fire was equally as significant. And so the debate continues. And then there's people like Aristotle. Aristotle has been an authority for individual thought and thinkers for years in the history of Western thought. And then here's a name in more recent times that you may or may not know of, Robert Noyce. Robert Noyce helped invent the microchip. And outside of the microchip, what else could have been so revolutionary in the world today as what that has done for mankind? But it's not just men who have been engaged in thought leadership. It's women as well. You can go back to as early as Emmeline Pankhurst, women's advocate for equal rights in England at a time when women were not thought of as someone who should be speaking up on the subject. They were treated more like chattel. Emmeline believed in civil disobedience to achieve her cause, and here she is being arrested for that activity. But she spawned people like Susan B. Anthony, who in the course of her time in the United States was more than just a face on the silver dollar. She was a social reformer and women's rights activist, played a pivotal role in the women's suffrage movement, and started community welfare houses in New York City. And then there's people like Elizabeth Magie. She invented the landlord's game, which in fact is the forerunner to monopoly. So why did she do it? She did it to draw attention to the robber barons of her day who exploited the working class. But even movie stars can be thought leaders. Here's a picture of Hedy Lamarr. Some of you may know or remember, 1940s movie star emigrated from Austria before the start of World War II and was an inventor who offered an opportunity to help her adopted country in their battle against the Axis powers. But she was not taken seriously because few thought that a woman and a movie star could develop such technology. As it turns out, the Navy adapted it in the 1960s. It's now used with Bluetooth and Wi-Fi technology. She was inducted into the National Inventors Hall of Fame in 2014. But she's just one of many thought leaders. Who can forget Betty Friedan, who led the women's movement in the 1960s, or her counterpart, Gloria Steinem, who is still active in her 80s today. And then there's Annie Leibovitz. If you know anything about photography or Rolling Stone, you've seen Annie Leibovitz's work. The covers of Rolling Stone are synonymous with Annie Leibovitz, and many of these people have been thought leaders in their own right. And then are there any Star Trek fans out there? If you remember the original Star Trek series on television, then you knew Uhura. Nichelle Nichols played her, and she was the first African-American woman to be featured on a television series. Now, few people know that after the show was canceled, she was contacted by NASA to recruit minority and female personnel for the space agency. She recruited the first female astronaut, Sally Ride, and the first African-American astronaut in Colonel Julian Bluford. And then, since we're on the subject of NASA, how many people know what MAG stands for? It's actually Maximum Absorbency Garments, and NASA invented them for the astronauts in space, and actually they're the forerunner to today's Depends. So, the next time you see a space launch and someone asks you, I wonder how they go to the bathroom in space, you'll know how. And then there's Christine Lagarde, who was the first woman and is the first woman of the International Monetary Foundation. She warned back in 2007 about the credit bubble that happened in 2008. But you know what? She wasn't taken seriously, and you can figure out why. And then last but not least, there's my great-great-great-great-great-granduncle, Ching Lu Yen Rubin. Notice the resemblance. He was a botanist, herbalist, martial artist, and there is documentation that he lived to be 197 years old. He's holding in his hand, by the way, a ginger root. I am very proud to have him as my uncle because it means that I've got good genes. But let's move on from that. And I want to take you from thought leaders to lava flows. And why lava flows? As an example of natural disasters that I think we are experiencing right now with ageism. Like many natural disasters, they come whether we're prepared for them or not, and they can be devastating. Well, the impact of aging is the same thing. It's happening at the same level of intensity as any natural disaster, but how we choose to deal with it and when we choose to deal with it is totally up to us. So let's talk about this. Let's talk about this elephant in the room. And let's look at it from the standpoint of the reality of numbers. First of all, there are more people today over the age of 40 than under. There are 78 million aging baby boomers in the U.S. alone. 85 plus is the fastest growing age group. A third of our nation are caregivers. And yet $100 billion is spent on anti-aging products here in the United States alone. Ageism impacts jobs. It impacts fraud on the elderly. It's been a cause of suicide, making 85 plus the largest suicide rate age group in the country. It's a cause of neglect, isolation. People question their relevance when they're no longer employed. Self-worth, self-esteem. It affects public transportation, how we look at food insecurity, substance abuse, domestic violence, affordable housing, access to health services. The disparity between urban and rural communities in terms of health services is deplorable. And by not dealing with ageism, both positive and negative, we're not considering the economic and financial opportunities that are available to us, all under the banner of ageism. So I'd like to think that today is the start of a new day and that we can work together to change this culture of ageism. But let's not fool ourselves. The issues are complex and they're very interrelated. And so we need to give up this thought that if we work on one to the exclusion of another, we'll truly make the impact we're so anxiously looking to achieve. So let's define the problem. Andy Rooney probably said it very well when he said, the idea of living a long life appeals to everyone, but the idea of getting old doesn't appeal to anyone. The fact of the matter is, most of us do not think of ourselves as old. We think of someone else as being old. And so what determines when one is considered old? Because people are being seen as old earlier and earlier. To me, it's all a matter of perspective. Not that long ago, there was an article in one of the national newspapers talking about people in their 30s who could not get jobs in Silicon Valley because they were considered too old. And then how many people can remember someone like Abby Hoffman or Jerry Rubin when they came up with the phrase that was so popular at the time, never trust anyone over 30. Well, Abby Hoffman, if he was alive today, would be 82 years old. And then there's my friend Carly, age 12, who says, just because they are in their 20s or older than you does not mean they are old. It's all a matter of perspective. Coming to terms with this, there are various terms that have been used throughout the years. One is aging in place, probably was the first one used. Aging in community, communities for all ages, livable communities, and the one that I gravitate towards, which is age-friendly communities. The term aging in place referred to the fact that most people wanted to live in their homes for as long as possible. But we all know people who are aging in their home and do not have a good quality of life. Hence, aging in community. The fact that community must be a part of helping people to age in place. And then we said, well, if we're looking at communities, let's look at communities for all ages. And what does that mean? What defines a livable community? And then the term age-friendly. Now, there are people who believe that age-friendly is about aging. It's not. Age-friendly is about everyone. Age-friendly, in fact, is an investment in our families, our communities, and ourselves. Becoming age-friendly prepares communities for this dramatic shift in demographics that's taking place today. It allows us to recognize the valuable role that elders and others can play. It makes aging issues part of strategic and long-term planning, something that in many communities is not part of long-term planning now, and as seen through the eyes of an elder, foster communities that are great places to grow up and grow old. Age-friendly communities provide easy access to information and resources. There is information and resources available in any community if you know where to look, because there's no one location to find them all. Elders are encouraged to become active community members. And there is respect and social inclusion. And one more thing, societies that embrace an age-friendly community adapt communities that impact the economy and the environment through the longevity dividend. People are living longer, people have money to spend. How are we including them in the ongoing economy? Those that do will have a competitive advantage over those that do not. So, how do we build a better community? The secret, I say, is in the recipe. And the recipe is not that secret. In fact, according to the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, the main ingredients include community engagement, cross-sector collaboration, mutual respect and understanding, adequate resources, shared vision, and skilled leadership. Applying that to the community encourages collaboration and community input. It addresses resident, business, and economic concerns. It bridges the gap between increasing demands and available services. It minimizes duplication of services and at the same time reduces expenses. And it minimizes potential for increasing revenue and improving the quality of life for all residents. The results of those that have already undertaken this initiative are impressive. In states like Texas to Michigan, Hawaii to New York, cities like New York and San Francisco, Denver and Atlanta lodge, counties like San Diego County in California and Sarasota, Florida, St. Louis, Missouri, and others, and in small communities in Maine, Bodenham, Maine, with a population of 2,900, or Newport, Vermont, with a population of 5,000, or regions like Manitoba, British Columbia, with 100 communities under their umbrella, or whole countries like Age-Friendly Ireland, and work that's being done in the European Union. So who supports these efforts? Foundations, corporate sponsors, civic organizations, universities, municipalities. Who is prepared to take the lead? There are others that you probably know that I don't. Please share. We need to hear from you. But some more notables leading the way that I have discovered are foundations like the John T. Gorman Foundation, that's focused on low-income elders and housing issues, or the Tufts Health Plan Foundation, which has made age-friendly part of its core component of funding. They have focused their attention on a number of age-friendly communities and development of them in Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and New Hampshire. There's the Patterson Foundation, supports the initiative at a countywide basis and is doing it to promote healthy living for people of all ages. And then there's the Margaret Cargill Foundation. Margaret Cargill Foundation put up $350,000 for rural aging grants to support key initiatives, recognizing that this works in rural communities as well. And then, last but not least, is Grantmakers in Aging, a national organization whose members share recognition that a society that is better for older adults is better for people of all ages. So the question is, what can you do to change this culture of ageism? I would say, embrace the challenge. Accept the reality. We're all aging. Acknowledge the elephant in the room. Disrupt the culture of ageism. Change the prevailing view of funding so that it is not focused on any one specific issue, but sees how it is connected to many others. Embrace the benefits of collaboration. Nobody does this on their own. Support startup efforts and long-term sustainability. And last but not least, lead by example. The decision is yours. My friend Tori, age 10, when asked about one bit of advice he'd give to somebody younger than themselves, said, just keep going with what life throws at you. Well, we can just keep going with what life throws at us, or we can take the advice of Jan, age 85, who's an educator and entrepreneur. We are both teachers and learners lifelong. Live your learning. She also is a proponent of passion and purpose. Changing the culture of ageism, your voice counts. It certainly counts in disrupting the culture of ageism. So how can you help? How can you be a part? First of all, you can begin the conversations in your own community. I would encourage intergenerational and cross-sector dialogue. Explore ways that we can work together to promote our common cause. And at the very least, sign up to contribute comments on my blog, wisdomofage.net/blog, so that people can hear from you. And lastly, no one does this alone, as I said. I need your help. Let's work together. Whether you need someone to be a keynote presenter at your organizational functions, someone who can work with you to organize, customize age-friendly workshops, to create wisdom of age circles that are intergenerational and address local community issues, or to be part of Train the Trainer in opportunities for leaders of all ages to be engaged in this movement. So take the next step. Invite others to join us and look for our future webinars that we'll be holding on this and other important topics.
Wisdom of Age really touched me. I wept on the very first page just because of the depth of the message. And what impacted me even more is I was learning from people 5 years old as well as people 103 years old. This is precious. And it speaks to a dialogue we need to have about how we treat each other, how we value our families, how we value our relationships. God bless Jeff Rubin for initiating this dialogue, which I hope turns into a national movement. Please visit Amazon and get your copy of